Poor little furry thing.
Hello everybody, welcome back to the channel. This is my second wrap-up video for New World's November. So one of the things I've done this month to fit in with the theme as a co-host for the event is to move some of the videos that I had scheduled for this month that weren't connected to science fiction onto another month. So it's kept the month kind of thematically sticking to science fiction, which is quite cool. So you will see soon on the channel this month my Deep Space Nine favourite episodes video, and I've kept that in there because it's connected to New World's November. But I've loved being co-host, but this second wrap up is another bunch of stories. It's actually 7 stories, so 7 stories. Only two of them are novels, and the rest of them are short stories. And it leads me into my last bit when I talk about what I'll read for the rest of the month. But I'm going to start with a book that I did end the first wrap up with to say that I'd started it and clearly I'd finished it now. So this is connected to the prompt about extraterrestrial science fiction. And this is Harry Harrison's Death World 1. So this was a reread for me, but it was so long ago that I'd read it. I'd always remembered the cover, because I loved that cover. So I'd always remembered that, but I didn't really remember a lot of other things about the book. So it was almost like reading it for the first time. And I really enjoyed it. Harry Harrison's got very plain, matter of fact, sometimes slightly humorous, slightly cocky, a very character-based way of telling a story. And I like the way Harry Harrison writes. And it was an interesting plot about this guy, Jason, who goes on a planet that is notorious for having these super dangerous animals on it and plant life on it. And it's just the whole planet is quite dangerous. And the people that live on it are have these sort of extra strength and extra abilities that make them more than just your average human. And he went onto the planet because he was curious, and then once he's there he realizes that there's a bit of a mystery to the planet and he needs to find out what the answer is to this mystery. Then that leads him to kind of a civil war on the planet, and he tries to broker peace between two warring factions on the planet. And it's really interesting, and there's bits about telepathy in it, and I think the telepathic stuff in the plot and on the planet was the most interesting thing for me, and I like the way it weaved into the story. But I really enjoyed it, and I have got Death World 2 and 3 that I recently purchased as again another repurchase, because I used to have those books, bought them again, and I will probably read Death World 2 and Death World 3 early next year. So yeah, I really enjoyed that. So that was a nice way to start the second, well, technically third part of the New World's November series of books. And then I read a story from Tales from the Galaxies. So this was just a random book that I found, where it's got some really cool authors in it. So it's got Robert Sheckley, John Wyndham, Murray Leinster, and Annabelle Williams-Ellis. I don't know Annabelle Williams-Ellis, but I know the others. And I read the Robert Sheckley book, and I read the Robert Sheckley story, The Odour of Thought. This is a story I remember reading years ago. Again, thought I'd read it again, The Odour of Thought. And it's a really interesting story. I mean, it's quite typical of Robert Sheckley in the sense of it's kind of thinking outside the box. It's a bit of a thought experiment, and it sort of plays out without a lot of plot, but just sort of using the device in the story to its logical conclusion. And it's just really interesting, the idea that this astronaut gets crash landed on this planet, and the animals around him are blind, and there's this sort of consistent element of danger around him, and he realizes that all of the animals are using their smell, or their sense of smell, and their sense of smell for picking up thoughts for their hunting. And I think that's quite an interesting concept that plays out really well. And he realises he has to think like a different animal to not be so vulnerable to the predators. So it's just that kind of idea. So it was a bit of fun. That was cool, Robert Sheckley. I love Robert Sheckley. And then I read from this book, another anthology book, I read The Idiot Stick by Damon Knight. And I like Damon Knight. And this was a bit of a dystopian kind of slave master narrative, where you've got these aliens that appear on Earth and they decide to start doing things for Earthlings. It kind of, and to be honest, at the beginning I thought, oh, is he retreading what he did on To Serve Man, which is one of his most famous stories and one of my favourite stories. And I thought this seems quite similar, but it did have a very different sort of twist to it, if you like, because it was all about the idiot stick, which is this device that we're using to do these aliens bidding, and there's a kind of almost like a punchline at the end that's connected to the idiot stick. It's not a very long story, but I enjoyed it, and I'm glad it didn't end up being exactly the same as To Serve Man, but that was nice. Damon Knight writes good stories, so there was that one. And then I read my favourite short story out of this lot, I think. Yeah, I really enjoyed this story. And this was by an author I didn't know before called Charles Fortenay. And when I talked in the New Wars November Voxer group chat thing about this author, no one else had heard of him. So I think this is quite an obscure author. And this is just such a great cover, this, isn't it? So that was an anthology book that I bought. And there's loads of randomness on the cover. And this is a story called The Silk and the Song. And it was a really intriguing, enjoyable, fresh, and kind of slightly odd story where humans are ridden about like horses. And as you get into the story, it becomes clear that the main character, who is quite happy to be effectively a horse, then realizes that they could be treated better, and it's almost like a rebellion against this slave master idea of these humans being ridden, and he realizes that humans could be treated as better citizens than they are in this society. And it's all based around, and the way The Silk and the Song comes into play is really nice as well, because there's this sort of like legend that the silk and the song will bring about their freedom, and it plays out really well, and I really enjoyed it. So Charles Fortenay, it's a one-off story. I've never seen him before, don't know if I'll see his name again, but I enjoyed that story, The Silk and the Song. So there was that one. Then I read the only novel that I haven't mentioned yet, so obviously I got Death World there, but I read Little Fuzzy by H. Beam Piper. So H. Beam Piper is really famous for this book and the other two books in the series. And the reason why this was known to me was because I read John Scalzi's book called Fuzzy Nation, which is a rewrite of Little Fuzzy. So as far as I know, that's pretty rare for an author to rewrite someone else's work. I'd love to know more examples of this, but I wanted to read Little Fuzzy after I read Fuzzy Nation and really enjoyed it. And it's a bit of a weird thing because I read this wanting to make a comparison, but my memories of Fuzzy Nation by John Scalzi are actually quite general. So I know I really liked it, but as far as comparing them, everything I remember from it is in here, and it's kind of block-based stuff. So I know there are definitely some differences, and I will read Fuzzy Nation again very soon, hopefully. But I really enjoyed this, and I don't think it matters that it came out the age it did. It doesn't seem very dated. So this came out in 1962. So this came out in 1962, and the approach to the fuzzies, which are, I realised later on that I could have been reading these creatures as Ewoks, and it would have made sense. They're kind of a bit like Ewoks, but obviously written in 1962, before earwax were invented. But it basically concerns the kind of the basic rights that should be attributed to a sentient species that's very self-aware and uses tools and knows about symbolism and knows about communication with other species and can communicate and has a language, all those different things, and about how that is established, and basically the establishment of a new definition for these creatures would then threaten the company that works on that planet, because they're not supposed to be doing the work they do on a planet that has sentient life on it. So that's the basic idea of the plot, and a lot of it is a big chunk of it anyway is the court case when the main character is trying to prove that they are sentient species, and the corporation is trying to prove they're not, and they're just mindless animals. And I really liked it. I really cared for all of the characters in it. I was intrigued to see what would happen next. It didn't feel very dated. And it felt actually like I liked this more than Fuzzy Nation by Scalzi. I really liked Fuzzy Nation, so I need to read it again just in case. I like the way Scalzi writes. But there were some elements of this that I don't think were in Fuzzy Nation that I really liked. So, yeah, this was a big success. Really enjoyed it. I like the fact that in 1962 you've got essentially a science fiction book about animal rights right back then. I think that's pretty cool. So 1962, Little Fuzzy, finally read it and really enjoyed it. Really enjoyed it. And then I also, because then that was kind of like into the vintage part of the classic period part, which was like the prompt 3. And then that was going to kind of finish the whole first 3 prompts, and I was going to go into the last prompt, which is about AI and robots. So for this prompt, the first thing I read was Super Toys Last All Summer Long by Brian Aldiss. So I wanted to read this because I wanted to rewatch a film that I really liked called AI Artificial Intelligence. And I thought I'd finally persuaded my wife to watch it, because straight away, as soon as I watched it years ago when it first came out, I watched it in the cinema actually, and when I first watched it, I immediately thought I really wanted my wife to watch it, because essentially that film is really about motherhood, and I really wanted to know what she thought, as she is a mother and a fantastic mother, and I wanted to know what she thought of the film. She was very resistant because she thought all she knew about it was very sad and it was upsetting, and that the child-mother relationship was very complicated, and she just was put off. So I had managed to persuade her to watch it, and then we went on our TV to see where we could watch it, what service would show it, and it was only on Paramount Plus, which I don't have. So that was really annoying. So we didn't get to watch it, but I did read Super Toys Last All Summer Long, which is the original story that the film is based on, and I really enjoyed it. I thought it was excellent, and it was nice to read some more Brian Aldiss. Brian Aldiss, I think, is quite underrated, so that was really cool. And that led me into this last prompt, and it gives me the doorway into the last 10 days or whatever of the month, and the last bit of New World's November 2022. So what I'm going to do for that, because it's AI and robotics based, I'm basically going to base the last week of the reading around these 2 anthologies. So you've got 2 anthologies that are based around AI, and you've got an older one that's edited by William F. Nolan, who wrote Logan's Run, and this is the Pseudo People, and this looks really good, but it's got authors like Ray Bradbury, Isaac Asimov, Henry Kuttner, Charles Beaumont, Ron Goulart, Richard Matheson, and loads of others. And it looks really, really cool. So that's one of the things I'm going to be reading for this last prompt. And then this book is a more recent book, Robots and Revolution, made to order. And this has got authors like Peter F. Hamilton, Annie Lee Newitz, Alistair Reynolds, Ken Liu, and Sarah Pinsker. So much more modern authors. I mean, there's loads more as well. Is there any more that I know? No, there's loads of names I don't know there. which is always good. Sometimes it's good to discover new authors with these anthologies. So, Made to Order is going to be read alongside The Pseudo People as the last bit of New World's November 2022 for me. Oh, there's also another story as well that I did read just before Super Toys last all summer long, and that's The Egg by Andy Weir. So this was not something I read physically because it's only available on audiobook. So this was something that I heard, and it was one of those. It wasn't really done by an actor. It was done by some sort of computer voice. So it was the same as reading it, really. I put my own inflections in it, and I really liked it. So Andy Weir is someone I've liked everything I've read so far. I haven't read Project Hail Mary, but I keep getting told it's fantastic. So I'm sure I'm going to like him a lot in general. And this story is from a collection of audio stories that are called The Egg and Other Stories. And apparently, I've been reliably informed by Brandy from Booklectic that the other stories are even better than The Egg. And I really like The Egg. It was a new take, or at least Andy Weir's take, on the age-old sort of fantasy trope of looking at life after death, what happens when you die, and looking at a more science fiction approach to it. And it's really cool because it kind of it gets quite expansive and trippy almost, but also it's got that unexpected twist to it as well. I liked it. It wasn't very long, but I think it packed a punch. So I would recommend you listen to that as well if you get a chance. It is on YouTube, but it might be better if an actor read it out properly. But yeah, The Egg by Andy Weir was the other one. So I did steer away from my original intentions, but that's because I've got so much science fiction to read, I could have chosen anything. And the prompts were quite general. But I really enjoyed what I've done so far, and these two anthologies I'm going to finish with are really intriguing and cool. So, a bit of news to finish. Bit of news to finish. Some of the people that were co-hosting this New World's November group, an event, we've decided to take charge of a new book club that we're going to announce, or we have announced, and this is part of my announcement, on YouTube, which is the New World's SF Book Club. So this is when we all get together, we nominate a book. So there's 10 of us so far that's nominating books, and out of those nominations, a book gets picked every month, and then we'll talk about it on here. And if you guys want to read it as well, so they can be like read-alongs, then that would be cool. And the one that I've picked is quite an interesting one. So I've picked a book that I haven't read. And I don't think a lot of the other guys would have read it as well. It's not massively obscure, but it's quite new, and it's an author that doesn't get talked about that much. So, I'm hoping that one gets picked, but regardless, I'm really excited to see what gets picked. And the first book is going to get picked next week, live on YouTube, to be read in January. That's the idea for the first bit of the book club. So the New World's SF Book Club is a really great idea that at the moment features 10 nominators for the books that are going to get read, and then we'll tell everyone on here about what's been picked, and if anyone wants to join in with us reading it, that will be cool. So look out for those videos talking about the New World SF Book Club. So thanks for watching. That's what I've been doing with New World's November. Those two anthologies, what I'm going to do, rather than do another wrap-up video for New World's November, I'm going to use my previous sort of regular feature series, Spotlight and Short Stories, and I'll talk about those two books in the Spotlight and Short Stories in December. So there we go. Thanks a lot for watching, and see you later. Bye.